you know what they say, a Dr. Pepper a day keeps the doctor away. Is that what they say? I don't know, but there's like an old lady that's lived to like 107 years old, and she swears by drinking 1 Dr. Pepper a day. So this is Life Advice with Ash and some random old lady. Hi there, bookish besties. Welcome back to the channel with me, your host. I kind of like calling myself a host. It's kind of fun. I hope you guys got your little bevy of choice. I'm going back to my roots of my Dr. Pepper. Not sponsored, but dear please God, I think this is like a dream of mine. Just putting that out there. I've got a really exciting video for you guys, so stick around, stay tuned, and we are going to dive into what makes a great fictional villain. I am really excited about all the growth my channel has seen recently, and it's all because of the love that you guys have given it. So thank you so much. I'm looking to really expand my content and all the things that I do. So I really want to hear from you guys. What topics do you want me to discuss? What series do you want me to dive into? What content do you guys want to see from me? Do you want to see book reviews? Do you want to see analytics? Do you want to see top picks, no picks, my TBR versus my DNF pile? Want to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comments below. We are so close to 500 subs. I'm screaming. I can't believe it. When I first started this page just a couple months ago, I didn't think it was possible, and here we are. I have a goal to get there by summer, so please help me out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fam, join the fun. Without further ado, y'all, get your bevy, get comfy. I don't have a blanket today. My outfit was too cute to cover it up, if I'm being totally realistic. You guys get me on that one. And let's get started. Literally taste all 23 flavors. When I was a kid, my parents used to not let me have Dr. Pepper because they said it tasted like medicine. And then one day I drank it and I said, if all medicine tastes like this, you wouldn't have to shove it down my gullet. I'm from Alabama. What can you expect? Wow, that was embarrassing. All right, y'all, here is what you came for. What makes a good fantasy villain? We are going to do a deep dive and really explore 3 different franchises with the villains that they have and what makes them a good villain and what are those characteristics, and let's talk about it. Quick spoiler warning, I am going to dive into the Hunger Games, the Throne of Glass series, and the Court of Thorn and Roses series. If you have not finished any of these 3 books, I'm gonna give a little timid spoiler warning. Feel free to skip through this video, skip parts as you like. I would have all the timestamps in the comments below. You can just jump from part to part, whatever you want to listen to. And if you want more case studies, please let me know and I'll dive into your favorite books in below. So recently, really good villains, and I say good, I mean just enjoyable villains that I want to read and I actually want to hate, are really hard to come by for me these days. It feels like a lot of writing, and I think I'm leaning more towards the media movie side of things and book side of things, but it feels just like a lot of villains are lackluster. I don't really understand their motives. I don't really care if they win or not. They just seem very bland and cookie cutter. So I wanted to ask myself, well, what makes a good villain? And I found my answer, so let's talk about it. In the comments below, I want you to answer the question, what defines a good villain? I'm about to answer it for you, but I'd love to know your take first. For me, there are 2 types of villains, and a good narrative has both. Your first type of villain is what I like to call your big bad. These big bads are just evil at their core. They want chaos. They really don't have any motivation or ambition besides just power and ruling and grr. Star Wars Palpatine. He's a big bad grr villain, and he's just bad. But then you have what I like to call your complex villain. And this is a villain that maybe automatically, maybe through time, you get a little bit of backstory of. You get to understand their motives, understand the way that they think, and maybe you empathize, maybe you sympathize, but at the whole, what they're doing is not right. So a couple examples, like I just said, Star Wars Palpatine. Palpatine is that big bad. He is that grr. He just wants chaos. His counter of that is Darth Vader. At first, Darth Vader is that big bad grr. He is just evil. And throughout the movies, we get his backstory. Heck, we get an entire prequel about his backstory and how he came to be, and thus making Darth Vader such a more complex villain because you, the reader, the viewer, the audience, are beginning to sympathize with this character. You're sympathizing with Anakin and understanding the trials and tribulations and the choices that he made in order to get to where he is. The majority of us aren't villains, but we can understand the steps that one took to get there. So this complex villain is not just evil for evil's sake. They have a clear motivation, a really complicated morality and backstory. Usually they're related somehow, some way to the protagonist, whether familial or just in the steps of the narrative. They have this personal connection. A lot of times they have this charisma, and that gets them to where they are. Not all the time, but usually they have a little bit. If not charisma, they definitely have power. And they also make you feel something. It becomes complex because the feelings and emotions you're feeling towards this character become complex. You are basically witnessing cognitive dissonance because you understand their pain, but you don't agree with the actions that they're doing. Now, these two types, the big bad villain and the complex villain, can be the exact same character. And we see that in our very first case study. Ooh, yes, big girl words, we're gonna use them. Case study of President Cornelius Snow. So in the original trilogy of Hunger Games, Snow is that big bad. We don't have a lot of backstory on Snow. We don't see a lot of his motivations. He just is. He just is evil. And then we get more complex villains through, for example, the career tributes like Cato. We understand the decisions that Cato's making. He's kind of been, he's a child. He's been taught his entire life, like, this is what I have to do. But he's also the bad guy trying to kill Katniss and Peeta. So we understand the decisions that he's making, though we don't agree with them. But we can have somewhat kind of sympathy for this complex character. And then it evolves as well with Coin. Though Coin is an interesting character because we don't really know, like, she's like a villain coded until the end when her true colors come out. But we do get to see some decisions that she makes and who she is and her motives and her motivation all throughout Mockingjay up until the climax of that book when Katniss puts it all together and realizes she's just the double-sided coin to Snow. So in the original trilogy, Snow is just this big, bad, evil grrr. He has some interesting points. He has some morality where, his entire thing is, I'm not going to lie to you. We're going to tell the truth to each other. You promised me that. So we see it's in bits and pieces of himself, but through Katniss's POV, which remember, Katniss is a very, very unreliable narrator, Snow is evil. Snow must die. Point blank, period. It's in the prequels, specifically Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, that we really develop Snow from this big bad villain to this complex villain. We now understand really why Snow is the way that he is. Yes, he was just kind of born bad. He was kind of born cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But there's also situations that put him there. He lost his parents at such an early age, and they had no money, and he was starving on the streets, and the only clear path for him and his family was for him to win that Plinth Prize and go to university. That was his path, his direction to save his family name and to save himself. And he was really heads down ambition, huge for villains, and hot take, protagonists as well. It just looks a little different for those protagonists, but they all have ambition too. But we learn why Snow is the way that he is. So does it make any of the actions that Snow does okay in the previous books or in Sunrise on the Reaping? Hell no. Hell no. No, no. But it adds context. And for us as a reader, it's a much more interesting story when you yourself are battling, okay, this character is bad, but I understand. But he's still bad, but I understand. It's a nice back and forth that really develops this complexity. Case study number 2, we're going to talk about Throne of Glass. Starting out with Maeve. So yes, Maeve is Valg. She's evil, but she has a hell of a backstory. And yes, she's ancient and she's powerful, and she has a lot of the book being just this evil being. And we're kind of taught throughout Throne of Glass that Valgs are just evil. That's it. They have no human emotion. They have nothing. They are just evil. But Maeve is the exception because she's so insecure. She does not want to go back home. She is desperately trying to find a place to call home. She's desperately trying to run away. She's a world walker for a reason. And though that's a little bit of a backstory, not as complex as, say, an entire book of President Snow, enough for the viewer to be like, oh, dang, girl, I kind of get that. I kind of understand never feeling at home and never feeling enough in the space that you're in and wanting to escape and wanting to go to a new world. Well, maybe I'll be accepted and maybe I can actually be myself and be true to myself and not have to marry these awful kings where I'm treated terribly and treated like less than. And thus it takes Maeve from this just evil being that we are taught all Valg are to a much more complex character of someone who's insecure in their own skin and they're just trying to find a place to call their home. Now, on the contrary of that, Erawan is just pure evil. He's the big bad. He is the just evil of it all. He is the pure Valg, and his only motivation is power and ambition. He just wants to conquer a world to conquer a world. That's really kind of it. That's all the Valg used to do, is just bloop, 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 conquer worlds. Call it a day. And Valg lack any human emotion, so we're really able to put Erawan in that big bad position where he is just evil. But it balances with the other complex characters and the other complex villains that we get in the narrative. Which leads me to the most complex villain I think we have in the entire Throne of Glass series, which is the King of Adarlan, aka Dorian Havilyard I. The king went from being a big bad villain from books pretty much 1 through 4 of just the king is evil, the king is bad, the king must die. I remember reading it for the first time and going through it, got to book 4, and was like, oh shoot, they killed the king and there's 4 books left. What do you mean? I guess there were 3 books left, but regardless, what do you mean? That you just killed the big bad? Who's gonna be the big bad next? And obviously we had Erawan and Maeve to fill the slots, but he up to that point was just evil and bad and wanted to conquer everything, and those were his only character traits, and that made him the big bad. It wasn't until Kingdom of Ash, book 8, when we got his backstory, we got that complexity coming in, and now we are reevaluating every single thing he ever did or said or done in the previous books and in the 10 years prior to that. Because everything has a new meaning, and now we see these acts of cruelty and ruthlessness as acts of love, acts of protecting his son, and it makes us recontextualize everything. And does that make the actions that the king did okay? No, but it adds weight to them. It makes you think about them, and it makes you kind of scale them, and it makes for an interesting character and an interesting story. My last case study is going to be one of the book series that's very, very near and dear to our hearts, and that is A Court of Thorn and Roses. So I'm going to start out first with just really focusing in on that first book where Rhysand is a villain. Hear me out. Because in book 1, he is a villain. I mean, granted, Amarantha's the big bad, that she is just evil and she is just has no motivations but power and control. But Rhysand is seen up there with her. And bit by bit throughout that book, and then, Court of Mist and Fury, hello! We unravel this concept of what Rhysand is as a villain to the point where he no longer becomes a villain in our eyes as the reader, as we are reading through Feyre's point of view. Very, very important for that little knowledge, because to some people, Rhysand is still the villain, but to our perspective, he is no longer the villain because we have gotten so much of his background and his backstory. Chapter 54, hello, I actually prefer 54 over 55. Hot take, I'll take it. But the more that we learned about his backstory and why he did what he did, and that his entire goal was just to protect the people and the ones that he loved, including our main character, we saw Rhysand in such a new light, and he completely left the villain spectrum, and now he's just a morally gray, winged man thing. Fae. And arguably, one of the best, or most favorite characters, I should say, in all of Sarah J. Maas's franchises. And it only took, like, a half a book for us to change our perspective on him. Talk about a complex villain. Next, we'll talk about the King of Hybern, which, by the way, side point, ADHD brain, doesn't have a name. Doesn't have a name. You know who else didn't have a name until Kingdom of Ash? The King of Adarlan. The King of Hybern, at his core, is evil. Do I think he's Valg? Yes, I do. Different conversation. We really know nothing about him or his backstory. All we know is that he wanted to invade and take over Prythian, including the human lands, and make the humans slaves again. And that's really it. He was the Palpatine. He was the one that was just the big bad. We already have the complex villains to create that interesting storyline, so now they come together to fight that big bad. And that's the King of Hybern. Nothing else really to it. You don't need a huge backstory and morality when it comes to some characters. And don't even get me started on Tamlin. I will. On how he went from fan favorite to villain in everyone's eyes. It can happen. Y'all, this was just the tip of the iceberg going into these villains. And I personally, I love a good villain. Y'all know this about me. My favorite romance arc is an enemies to lovers. And a lot of times that enemy is the villain in the protagonist's eyes. But I eat that up. So obviously, this is my thing. I'm into villains. What can I say? But let me know your hot takes. Do you agree with me here? Are there any other villains that you want to shout out in the comments below? Any other books, characters, analysis you want me to deep dive into? What do you think makes a good villain? And who do you think is the best villains in fiction? Love to hear your hot takes. You guys know I'm a yapper all day long. Let's discuss in the comments. Thanks y'all for being here. Let me know if there's any other villains or stories you guys want me to analyze. This is your sign to drink a dark pepper today. If you have not, you are welcome. And happy reading, y'all.